Hello, everybody. Welcome back. So, our next speaker, Stefan Kleineikenscheidt, will share the amazing story of how he went from building a small little app to suddenly running an entire company. And his favorite story is Nathan the Wise. And basically, it's a story about tolerance and friendship. And so, in that spirit, he's now going to share his amazing story. Please welcome Stefan to stage.
Hola, everybody. It's great to be here, and it's great to see that so many made it to this talk. In the next 40 or so minutes, I want to talk about my journey through the Atlassian app business and want to share a few of my learnings. But before I go into detail, I want to tell you a story. My story before I got into founding my own company. And the story starts the same year many of us, or Europeans, got a new currency into their hands, the euro. Can you remember the year? Anyone?
2001.
Actually 2002. And in the world of software development, at the time, Bugzilla was still the go-to bug tracker. And there were two young guys from Gentleman who set out to change that. And just like them, I also had just finished university, but unlike them, my first job was in corporate IT. And I developed some small software for an internal team, and that alone was really not interesting. But about 2 or 3 months in, a colleague of mine suggested to use a tool that would change my entire career, Jira. The decision to use Jira was a no-brainer. It helped our team to get the job done, and everyone loved it because it was so simple to use. Unfortunately, the users of the software we had developed weren't that happy. They didn't love the software as much. Actually, they didn't even like it. For me, as a young and ambitious software developer with a stark interest in product management and usability and so on, this was really disappointing. But after 2 more jobs and in total 8 years of corporate IT, I know that this is kind of the default in many companies, unfortunately. But what could I do? I knew I wanted to build software for happy users that use the software because they like it and they get value out of it, and not because some manager tells them to use that software. And basically just like why my team had chosen Jira. However, at the time, moving to the other side of the world and trying to get a job at Atlassian wasn't a real option for me, and that alone if Scott and Mike had even hired me. Then, in 2004, Atlassian announced Confluence, and I can still remember how excited I was that they were building an enterprise wiki product. I really thought they were going to be big at that time. I introduced, of course, version 1.0 of Confluence in my little team of 8 or so people, and we started documenting. We documented our software, our processes, just about everything what we were doing. And I was the tech lead of that team, and I was suddenly able to deflect a lot of questions I got. And I always said, have you checked the wiki, when I got a question which was already answered in the wiki, and it worked out really well. However, one day I was asked to share some of the information we had on our wiki with an external company. And this was a problem because it was just a team wiki running on an internal system with a lot of firewall rules. So the external company couldn't check the wiki. Also, as my boss suggested, just export it to PDF. That wasn't possible at the time. Confluence just didn't have a proper export format. And so we had a high-paid consultant to copy-paste the Confluence pages into a Word document. Bummer. And I knew there should be a better way to export Confluence content. And there was also already something like the Universal Plugin Manager. I think it was called a little bit different back then. And I knew I could build something to make this happen. So I started developing an app as a side project. It would export multiple pages to DocBook XML, in case you know that, and then to PDF from there. And that app would later become the ScrollWiki exporter. And I met my co-founder Tobias, who joined the project with a lot of energy. And finally, took us some time until we did that, but in 2009 we eventually started a company, K15T Software. And we called the app ScrollWiki Exporter because of the first content managers in history. Monks who put the tradition and knowledge of mankind onto scrolls. And so far so good, but we had to find out two things at the time. First of all, a lot of Atlassian users contacted us not because of our products, but they actually needed help in running their Atlassian installations. Also, our product sales weren't high enough to pay the bills. So we had to make a decision, and although it was not the original plan, but we went into the consulting business. And we became Atlassian Solution Partner in 2010, and a bit later, Enterprise and Platinum Solution Partner as well. And doing professional services in app development was a challenge, and it still sometimes is a challenge, but the direct feedback we get from our solution partner customers did help and still does help in the development of our apps. And today the services part of K15T is one of the leading solution partners in Germany, and we provide services and to clients in Germany and a few other European countries. But let's get back to the app business. As you can tell, we literally had just developed an app and just because of that founded a company. In hindsight, this approach was really naive, but we at least had the courage to make the first step, and we had to learn quickly. Either by fucking up, and learning from that failure and doing it better the next time, or sometimes we also did things right in the first place. In this first part of the talk, I will tell you how we turned our apps into a sustainable business. Two things I picked out, what I'm going to talk about, market positioning, sponsor development, marketing and design, and finally, one of our probably most unexpected win was customer support. Let's start with market positioning. As you can probably already tell, we didn't do that before we started building the exporter. And we not even did it before starting the company. As I said, we were pretty naive at the time. But it still happened, and at different occasions, and there was also some luck involved. For example, when I went climbing in the German Alps in 2009, we climbed that mountain in the middle, and in our group of climbers, there was a guy who was running the tool chain for the tech writers at a huge company in Germany called Liebherr, who produces construction and mining equipment. Of course, tried to pitch him Confluence and the scroll exporters. And I told him, hey, look, all your exporters will love it, they can work together with the engineers and will be great. But his initial reaction was a bit different. He said more like, nah, I don't think your wiki will ever be able to support all of our requirements. And it's a good example that Germans can be quite outspoken. But besides that, he also told me a lot about his tech writers and their challenges. For example, how to manage versions of the documentation and how to support different product variants. How to help authors to produce not only high quality content, but also consistent content. For example, using always the same term for the same thing. Or in internationalizing the content, which not only means translating it, but also provide different content depending on the country you're sending your documentation for legal reasons most of the time. And he sparked the interest in me to understand all this a lot better, and we had found our vertical market, in the vertical, more or less. In hindsight, I can't stress enough how important it was to get an idea about that, about the vertical market. And with vertical market, I mean a certain industry, or in our case, a certain occupation, like tech writers, or in a broader sense, content managers. And with the checklist I got on that mountain, and from many, many further conversations with tech writers, I got a pretty good idea of what they needed beyond just Confluence or scroll exporters. And we had kind of a checklist what we had to do and to add to our product portfolio. Also, it helped to focus our marketing and communication because we knew which target groups we had to address. And that said, we have a lot of customers who are not at all doing technical communication with our tools, but of course we don't turn them away and say, no, you can't buy our products. Besides the vertical, a choice of platform is also an important one. If you look at mobile app developers, these days they can pick between iOS and Android, and they usually have to provide their apps for both platforms. But a couple years ago, when there was still BlackBerry and you would have built an app for a lawyer, you would probably have also considered BlackBerry, because many lawyers, most lawyers use BlackBerries, right? And for Atlassian apps, it's kind of the same, but also different, because most apps only make sense either for Confluence or for Jira or other products. But if you have the option to solve your market needs with either a Jira app or a Confluence app, you should consider that Jira has roughly twice as many active installations as Confluence. So if you have the choice, pick Jira. Nick, you know why, right? And not Confluence, and let alone like Bamboo and Crucible and Fisheye, unless you have a real killer app for that, of course. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it at all. In our case, we had made this choice a lot without thinking about it a lot, so we were stuck with the less popular platform, but hey, Confluence is not that unpopular at all, so all good. Another option when you think about your app is if you want to have multiple apps. When we started selling our ScrollWiki exporter, it was an app that would export to multiple output formats. And we had quite a few customers who tried to make a good deal, and asked for a discount and said, look, I only need this export format and I don't want to pay for the other stuff. And so with version 2, we split up the exporters and had one app per export format. And this was pretty smart, because we have a fairly high percentage of customers who purchase actually 2 exporters, or some even like 4, 5, or even 6. And by the way, Scroll Office, they buy like PDF exporter and Scroll Office, which will be renamed to Scroll Word Exporter soon. So while these customers actually end up paying a little bit more, the customer price perception is better, because they can pick what they need and then pay just for that. Additionally, it allows you for advanced pricing options. For example, we created a niche product called Scroll Acrolinks Connector, which is for this terminology and content quality, and you need to have this external platform to connect to. And so we have very few customers for that, and we sell that at a very high price. Another example is how CodeBarrel is doing it with their automation for Jira plugin. They have a full version and a light free version. However, one word of warning, don't go nuts and split up your products in many, many different things, because it adds a lot of complexity because of the dependencies. Like in our case, when people always expect that all Scroll products are totally compatible with each other. And of course, it's for the developers, but it's also for the designers who need to make sure that it all works together. And finally, a word about competition. After the Scroll apps, we went for a new vertical, B2B project collaboration, and we developed our first Jira app called Backbone Issue Sync. You know, double the size of the market and active installation, so we tried that. However, while we developed it, 3 competing products appeared on the marketplace. And I can only guess how the sales would have grown if there weren't any competing products, but we still released it, and Backbone passed the other products, and we now actually have more active installations than all of the competing products combined. And this shows also a different perspective on competition. As a CEO once told me some time ago when I asked him about his competition, and he said, competing products validate a market. And there are few apps in the Atlassian ecosystem that have entered a competing market successfully. 2 examples here, again, automation for Jira. They do automation for Jira, right? And there are other apps in that domain. They still turned out to be pretty successful. They're now, within like 1 year, 1.5 years or something like that, they turned into a gold top vendor. And then there's Draw.io, which went after the diagramming market, and they now also have quite a few active installations. And how you can do it, there are different ways. You certainly have to have some kind of a different approach. Either your app needs to be different or your marketing needs to be different. And this might actually also include, and I'm open about that, is aggressive pricing. But I really don't recommend this to anyone. But it might be a choice for some of you, but I wouldn't actually go there. It doesn't make sense because it's B2B software, and the clients are actually willing to pay quite some money. Next is sponsored development. Can you imagine what this is about? Anyone? A few, okay. Have you done it? Also, yeah, okay. So sponsored development is an interesting approach if you have limited or no funding like us when we first started. And it means that a customer pays for the development of an app or a feature, and the vendor keeps the IP and then sells this app also to other customers. And it's beneficial for both the vendor and the customer. The vendor, of course, gets paid to build the app, which is good, but also the customer benefits because they get ongoing development and ongoing support, so they don't have to pay a lot of extra when the app needs to be made compatible with the new version of Confluence or Jira. It sounds great, but it also comes with a catch. So you really have to focus on building a product and not doing a project. And you need to have a clear line. What's a product feature that's interesting for all the customers you're targeting, and what is a product feature that just this one customer want to have. And we had, like, over time, we had more and more customers asking for features, and actually also they were also willing to pay for it. But some of the product features were just too specific. And in this case, it's really important to either say no, or another option, what we did and still do and try to extend on that, is have extension points or APIs so that the customers can hook in or get a solution partner to help with that. And from my personal experience, we had a few success stories with, or quite a lot of success stories with sponsored development. So Scroll Versions, Scroll Viewport, Backbone, they were all sponsored, at least in part. But we also had another F-up with the Scroll PDF exporter, where a customer asked us to create a diff functionality so that they could export a PDF and have the diff of the document in the PDF. And we only found out during the development that we didn't want to have that in the product because it was too specific for that customer, and it just didn't make sense to roll it out to all customers. So we kept that feature on a separate branch, and up to this day, we still create a special build for that customer every once in a while. It's a bit of a F-up, but if you keep in mind that sponsored development can turn out quite well, because you have a happy pilot. Ideally, you have a happy pilot customer who even helps with the initial marketing. Next is marketing and design. Roberto has already given a great intro to that, and if you haven't been in this room, the unlucky ones, I think there will be a recording, so you can watch that soon. Also, our former head of marketing, Davin, held a presentation last year at Atlas Camp, which is also available online. And with our own but I still want to tell a little bit about our own marketing, because I always thought that our marketing also was an F-up. But over time, I understood that this was not true. And it's just that our marketing, that we didn't do like the standard marketing tactics really well. We actually messed those up. But we had our very unique marketing mix, which I think which we did quite well. I really suggest to anyone who's starting with developing an app and trying to sell it, is really also not to do all the marketing things and only do them half-assed, but that you find your own marketing mix, which match with your skills, which match with your market. However, every one of you should do the basics, like defining buyer personas, think about the core messaging like USP and the core benefits of your product, and also the name. I mentioned Scroll Office before. We're renaming that to Scroll Word Exporter, finally, because people just look for Word Exporter when they Google or search on the marketplace. What worked well for us? Part of our initial marketing mix, so to speak, was that we invested a lot in the community to build personal relationships. So we went to many Atlassian user groups to meet Atlassian users. I think this is still something we do and everyone can do, because all of the org leaders are actually looking for presenters. Please do have a decent slide deck ready. I witnessed something else recently at a AUG. And we went to tech writing conferences to get in touch with tech writers. We gave talks there, which was really interesting because we were coming from this wiki perspective and telling them how they should do things, and they were like, nah, like this guy on the mountain, you know. But it was still very interesting, and its speaker engagements are really great because they're for free. And finally, as Roberta already said, Atlassian partners are really important. And it's interesting, you said you were at like 50 or 60%, 64. We're also around 60, so I think it's really important to enable the discount for partners, because a lot of the larger sales, the server and data center, they go through partners. And of course, the center of the community, Atlassian. We got in touch really early with Atlassian, and we were lucky because there was a tech writer, the Confluence tech writer, Sarah Maddox. She gave us great input for our apps and its positioning, and she provided the contacts back in the day to the product manager and also the product marketing team. And she finally even helped us to get the scroll apps into Atlassian. So Atlassian used since, I think, 2014 our tools for managing the content and displaying the content on conference.atlassian.com. And of course, we're really proud of that. It's great to get in touch with those product peoples because they help you to align with the product strategy of the products. And they also, when they buy into your idea, they really are great influences in the community. So you should, this is really important. But it's still, you have to keep in mind, it's not their main responsibility to talk to vendors. That is actually the responsibility of the ecosystem team, and there are a lot of people here. Peter is one. But if you're not at Atlas Camp, you can use the website, the community.developer.atlassian.com website. And in case you also didn't know, like I, until very recently, the two service desks, what they're there for. The dev help is the public one, and the AMKT help is the one for those vendors who have signed the agreement. And finally, you all have done one thing right. You came to Atlas Camp to meet Atlassians, to talk to them, and I think that's a really good step. And if you want to go one step further, Shri yesterday mentioned the next App Week in Amsterdam. If you want to go one step further, I think it really makes sense to apply for App Week because it's an invitation-only event. And finally, design here. Design is more important than ever. As Roberta already said, like the early years, everyone had like different designs. I myself consider myself a bit of a design nerd, so it was a personal need for me from day one. But I think today it's just a necessity, and there are really so many ways to get design right. I'm quoting again 99 Designs. My designers hate me for that, but that's actually a good way to get a proper looking logo and a visual appearance, and really there's no excuse for that, not to have that anymore. And also, design also includes the UX and the look and feel of your app. And there are many books about design out there. I read this a long time ago, and I read it because actually Scott or Mike gave a copy of this book to each Atlassian employee, probably like 10 years ago. Otherwise, they would have had a truck coming to different offices. And finally, the most unexpected win was about customer support. And I only got this after 2 or 3 summits and talking to people, and more people telling me that our support made a difference for them, that we provided good support, and that's why they invested in the first place, but also to continue to invest into our product and also grow the product. And I have some proof from our support system, comments from customers on our support system. So this guy thinks that Roman is the Chuck Norris of our support team, and he might actually be right. And this customer goes really deep with his wishes for Niels. And it's really good for the support team, of course, and it's a good laugh always when we have at our yearly meeting just before Christmas, when we look at all those fun comments from the support system. But honestly, Good customer support builds trust. Imagine yourself, you're a Jira or Confluence admin in some large organizations and you consider to buy an app from an app vendor somewhere on the other side of the world. You don't know them, there are probably only very few people, and you have a question. You email them, no response. You email them again, still no response. You try to call them with like the country code and everything, and eventually you get the response. And what do you think? Or if you contact them and within a couple hours or at least on the next day you get a swift response with your question answered. It's a pretty simple decision, right? And doing good support is actually quite simple, but it requires discipline and work. So I'm just telling you, do it timely and daily, and ideally have, especially when you do server and data center apps, have in-product troubleshooting functionality available. If you can afford it, get a dedicated support person. In our case, we had Niels, a working student who took care that the customers had the feeling that they were taken care of, and on the other side, he always nudged the rest of the team that they got the right answers. And also, no K15T talk without mentioning documentation. It's really helpful for the support. It's not only about deflecting customers from the support system and that they don't write support tickets. It's also good for the customers when they can get the answer right away and if they can help themselves. Many customers actually hate opening support tickets. What we do to do that is that we actually mark all the support tickets when we resolve them, that if they could have been solved with better documentation, and then we have regular doc sprints to improve the documentation. And this is our help center. We built it also on top of Confluence and our Scroll apps. That's another example from EasyBI. We're also really proud of that. They've created a really nice theme themselves. And if you're interested to use Scroll Viewport for your docs, please let us know. We're happy to get you started with it. That's the commercial. But customer support also have more real business value. It helps getting positive marketplace reviews. Every time you have a happy support customer, there's a good chance that he creates a good marketplace review. And if you ask him, the chance is even higher. Also, we send all of our support people to events like Summit the last few days because they know the customers best in general, so their needs, but also personally. And the existing customers really love chatting to the people they met through the support system. So this is really helpful, and it leads to personal contact and personal relationships, which also help in the long run when you need a customer story, when you are looking for customer stories or feedback about new features and so on. And that's why we also have chosen to rename customer support to customer success. It's not, other companies do that as well, but for us, this is like customer success means like before purchase and after purchase, they talk to the right people, and I think that works quite well for us at this time. To sum up, find a vertical or niche for your app to get focus. Use sponsored development if you have to, but use with caution. Pick the right marketing tactics that fit you instead of trying to do all of them half-assed. And finally, keep an eye on the quality of your customer support. Happy customers are gold. And after we had done all this, also around 2013 or so, our sales went up substantially, and we could start hiring people in a larger scale to fill all the gaps. And since then, I have regularly these moments when I realize I'm running a company, oh my God, which is the title of the second part of my talk. And I actually had this moment the first time when we hired the first person, Jens, and in the week before that, actually, and we were working in the shared office space, had a large table which would later fit 5, 6, sometimes even 7 people, but we only had 2 chairs for me and my co-founder Tobias. So I realized we need a chair, and I was like starting thinking, who's responsible for bringing chairs? Who can I call? And I probably spent too much time in a corporate environment, so it took me 2 seconds to realize it's my responsibility. I have to do that. And it was a little bit scary moment, but it also felt liberating and free and great. And getting the chair was actually also not that hard. The interesting parts came later. And one fun fact, apparently someone else told me, Jens is still taking great care that every time he moves in the office, he still has his own chair with him. He's taking very great care of that. So this part is about 4 topics, people in hiring, management, culture, and what I call personal stuff. And start with people in hiring, which I think is the most important part when you start growing. And probably like every company or startup, our early hires came from our network. And I think that's a really good pattern. And I can tell, like yesterday in the discussion, in the fire pit discussion, that's ND8, but I'll tell this anyway, that this helps to hire from the network. That's probably not under NDA, hopefully. But not only the hiring process is a lot smoother, but you also know the working style of those people and their attitude, and this helps the team to come together a lot faster, and then the team works better together. And I'm happy that most of our core team is still with K15T. But hiring from the network also comes with a little bit of a danger that you're only hiring people that are really similar and are like-minded, and this only works to a certain extent. And at some point, you need to start including people that are different. And it's all about, one click too late. And it's all about diversity, that you have different people on the team, because there are also other benefits of having a diverse team. And in our case, luckily, the core team was kind of like-minded, but we also had quite some differences, even my co-founder and I. So we had some big discussions about certain things, but we learned to deal with it, and so it was easier probably for us to get more different people on board. And we are working a lot on diversity. I'm proud that we have almost 30% female colleagues, and I'm also proud that we have people from 15 different countries and 5 continents, which is not only a nice thing, but it's also a real business value when you can have someone from the team talking to a customer in their native language. And finally, I had to learn that there are right people at the right time. They can be too early, which is kind of okay, or better, because when you realize and they leave and you still keep a good relationship, they can come back later, which happened with us, and it works out really well that one guy came back. But on the other hand, there are also colleagues who do a really great job at a time, but you have to realize that not everyone can grow with the company. And then when it happened to us, it took me really too long to understand, and he finally quitted to work in a different small company. And ideally, your core team works together really well, but at some point, and you don't have to manage a lot, but at some point you really have to get into management. And one of my favorite quotes about management is from the book Peopleware. The manager's function is not only to make people work, but to make it possible for people to work. And this is coming from an ancient time. It's coming from 1987, where things were a lot different probably in companies, and even today, I think that's the only way how you can run a creative business like software. But I interpret that for me that it's my responsibility to help people to do the right things and make the right decisions. And to do so, there are so many things to consider. I'm learning every day, and many of them are actually common sense. Some you have to learn, many you have to practice a lot, but I'm not going to explain a lot of that here. But I want to recommend this book to you. It's from Kim Scott, who was keynote speaker last year at Summit, where I learned about this book, and I wished I had read this a lot earlier. Especially if you haven't had any formal management training, I think this is a pretty good book to read. By the way, can you tell my new hobby? Taking photos of books lying on the office floor. But there's one thing about management I want to mention. because I think it might be relevant for you now or at some point. When we grew bigger, we introduced departments implicitly. We hired a head of engineering, a director of marketing, and appointed our former support student to be a head of customer success. And after a few months, I noticed some signs of office politics, like this is the responsibility of my team, or I have to decide that. And I didn't like that. I hated it because I knew it from my background in big corporate organizations. But more importantly, it slowed us down because many of the decisions were taken to the head office and they discussed, and then I was coming in and making decisions. And I think it was just slowing us down, and it was actually leading to frustration on more or less all levels, so to speak. And so we decided to split up all the teams, to create interdisciplinary teams around a product or a group of products, and have like marketing folks and product managers and engineers and support people to work closely together. And I also hope that this way decisions would be again made on team level. And this also worked to some extent, but it wasn't fully working actually. And here culture, our designer used beer for that. We're a German company. But I still don't think culture is only about beer. But joking aside, I have this quote from Peter Drucker really nails it. It's culture eats strategy for breakfast. And it's not only the strategy or the management to do a reorganization, it's really a lot about the culture. And in our case, we had we have the culture that a lot of the decision making is centered around me and my co-founder and the core team. And we really had to do something about the culture to make this happen, that the decisions are made in the teams. So luckily, a friend of mine gave me this book when I started thinking about this reorganization, and it's really a great book. I really recommend it. It's from Frederic Laloux, and he describes small and large organizations around the world, how they totally differently do things like many other big companies. And basically the culture, when you read this book, comes down to like 3 things. It's about self-management, so you have autonomous teams, you don't have fixed hierarchies, and you have distributed decision-making. And this does mean that you don't have like a classic hierarchy, but you have people taking over decisions based on their involvement and their experience with a certain topic, and then they make the decision. It doesn't mean there are no hierarchies at all. Every decision is made in consensus or so on. It's not that, but you also get rid of like this classic hierarchies. And it's interesting. We're still working on it. I might tell you a little bit more in a couple of months or years how it worked out. However, to make this work, it's really important that everyone understands the purpose of the company, including values, mission, vision, and of course goals. And they need to be broken down to the team level, and ideally the product teams, in our case, they have broken this down to themselves, and of course this all needs to be based on this overall purpose. And the third big aspect, which is important for me, for our culture, is that our people can come to our office without putting on a mask, which happens in many companies. So, and that work is more than just work. And this for the example I've been giving a lot for that is that it's great that people go to work and then hang out together after work and have drinks together. That's great, but it also means that it's also okay that someone decides not to join the drinks because he wants to go home, stay with his family, or just be on his own. So it's all about like this tolerance aspect. And finally, what I call personal stuff. And this is some stuff I haven't been talking a lot in public, and certainly not on a stage like this, but I'm still going to share it. It's a lot for me personally. It's really important to have a supporting environment. My wife, my kids, but also I have a peer group with 5 other CEOs, and we meet once a month, and we talk about things that we can share with each other, and it's really good to have someone who understands how it's like to be a CEO, and you can discuss things you cannot easily discuss with people in your company. Also, it's important to take care of my physical and mental health, because I need to manage myself properly, so otherwise the company doesn't get managed. And so what I do is I ride my bike for a couple of hours every week, which I call moving meditation. I also do non-moving meditation. And also, in rare cases, when I'm upset about something, I go home early or even stay a whole day at home, just to have not my colleagues notice that, and because it's not good for the company. And finally, which is goes in the same direction, but it's a bit different, is that I always see those things that I have to do for the company, and then there are things that I like to do. And if I'm not balancing this out, I'm at some point get stressed out, and that's also something my colleagues will notice. And so I'm taking care to keep that balance. And in the last chapter of the book I've already mentioned, Peopleware from Tom DeMarco, he describes what will be really important in a hopefully distant future, when we all look back onto our lives. Of course, it's kids, family, and friends, but as we have all spent a fair amount of time at work, I think we should also take that into our account. And it's probably great to have built the top-selling Jira or Confluence app, but if you can look back and have built a small or large community of people who work together, who live together, who laughed together and had fun together, I think that must be much more rewarding. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Stefan. One big round of applause, please.
Thanks. That's why I talk that long, you know?
All questions in the hallway. Just grab him, he's got the entire day.